Hello, everyone, and welcome to Frenn Diagram. This is the podcast where two friends catch up and find common ground between their favorite media. I'm Remy.
I'm Kat, and today we will be discussing our Frenn favorite, Alex Garland's Civil War. Warning, spoilers ahead.
Hey, Kat.
Hi, Remy, how are you?
I'm good. You know what is special about this week?
What is special about this week?
This is the first time in a long time since I can remember us covering a film that we saw together.
Oh, yeah.
Can you remember the last time that happened? Has it ever happened?
I don't know. I don't think we've ever done that.
I don't think we have either. I was just trying to figure that out.
Good point. Yeah, we've definitely
It's a friend first and a friend favorite.
Yeah, we've definitely seen the same movie on the same weekend.
Mm-hmm. But not together.
Yeah.
And then covered it on the pod. We've obviously gone to movies together. I guess, well, no. I don't know. Does Dune Part 1 count? Because we saw that in theaters together.
But we didn't cover it, like, contemporaneous with seeing it together.
Yeah. We waited a couple of years.
Oh, man. Yeah, we didn't even have a pod back then.
No, we didn't have anything back then.
But yeah, so last weekend, we went and saw Civil War, the new Alex Garland film. And I don't know where you rated it, but I fucking loved it. It was fantastic.
Yeah, I don't think I rated it yet. Mm-hmm. I'm still mulling it over, but definitely skewed quite positive on it, even though there was a lot to chew on still after I left. But definitely quite an experience. Yeah. You and I saw it in the Dolby Room
we
at
did.
AMC Lincoln Square. And I knew going in that sound mixing was going to be a big part of it. And I think when we left, you, me, Will, and Scott all went together, and I think we all roundly agreed the Dolby Room was the place to see Civil War.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, highly recommend it if you have that opportunity. It was loud, but not in a particularly aversive way or anything.
No.
I thought that it was very well suited for that film. Yeah,
exactly. It was appropriately loud for the content of that film.
Yeah.
I guess let's just clear some of the requisites before we launch into it. So, as Kat said, we're talking about Civil War, which was written and directed by Alex Garland, starring Kirsten Dunst, Kaylee Spaney, Wagner Moura, and Stephen McKinley Henderson. And the basic premise of this film is that it's following 4 journalists that are trying to reach D.C. to interview the president before oppositional forces overrun D.C. in a war-torn, pseudo-present-day United States. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, you and I were doing a little table talk before the pod, just kind of talking about some of the discourse around this film and how it's been quite divisive, which is unsurprising for a film about a civil war in the United States.
Yeah.
But divisive in a way you might not expect just from the title and description alone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I found it unexpected. I went in with very few expectations and didn't seek out any information beforehand, really. I watched the trailer, but that was about it. I knew Jesse Plemons was going to be in it, and I was like, I'm here for it. I'm here for the silly sunglasses. Let's go. Yeah, it was definitely unexpected for me. And I guess as a requisite, I will give the disclaimer that we will likely do a spoiler-free version of our discussion first, and then go into spoilers later on in the episode if we have things that we'd like to discuss. And so we'll make that very clear to you guys so you have time to turn off the pod. But as always, we're interested in hearing your thoughts after you do see the film. So come on back and let us know what you think and what your take was, because this is an extremely thought-provoking and divisive film. So we're interested in your takes.
Yeah, it's definitely like a Rorschach test film in that it is kind of a test to see how you think these types of ideas should be portrayed on screen, not necessarily a test of your political leanings, where it can be a version of that, but I think most people engaging with the film are more engaging with it on the level of sophistication of like, is this a successful film in terms of conveying larger ideas and storytelling. Mm-hmm. I think you and I both either read or listened to like some oppositional assessments. Yeah. I don't think we experienced any of the same ones, so I can't speak to the things you read, but I definitely saw a lot of like accusations of this like being unsuccessful in conveying any real ideas. Mm-hmm. But I disagree with that, and I'm trying to think of whether I want to go into detail on that now or in like the spoiler talk, but I think if you read one review of the film, you should read Paul Schrader's review.
Oh, yeah.
Which is that and when I say review, I mean his tweet about the film, which basically ends in all caps of him saying, "This is a horror film." And another way of saying that is, "This is a warning." And I think that is definitely a fair assessment, in that this is a film that I think you should take seriously and grapple with sincerely, because it does something that is an incredible service, which is that it brings a concrete visual and auditory experience to something that I think people are often too flippant about in the United States and globally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I love that. I hadn't seen that tweet, but I love the comparison and, well, not even comparison, but the classification of this as a horror film, because I noted in my notes that it employed tension perfectly throughout the film, and in a way that I felt was very akin to more of the horror and suspense genre. There were certain moments in this film where I was jumping in my seat and like very surprised by what I was seeing on screen and what I was hearing. And I think that they did a really great job of like keeping me on the edge of my seat the whole film. I wrote down nauseating.
Okay.
At certain moments, not in like a particularly gross way or anything, but just unsettling in a way that was visceral to me.
Mm-hmm. In unflinching depictions of violence, in a different way.
Well, that, and I mean, you and I discussed one moment in the film where you could tell that I was extremely uncomfortable, and that was one of those moments where there was kind of a gory moment. But I will say that particularly in like Jesse Plemons' scene, there was so much tension that I was just very viscerally unsettled, but it was not because of any visuals on the screen or anything like that. I just think that the way that they built suspense throughout certain scenes in the movie was very effective and just incredibly done. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think all of the action set pieces were very successful to me, and all of the more simmering scenes were very successful to me. A lot of this is unfolding over the course of basically a road trip where these 4 journalists are traveling together, not in like a fun road trip. I know road trip has like a fun connotation. I don't know what the other, what's a neutral connotation road trip? They're on a journey essentially to reach the story before it's no longer accessible. And they're traveling through war-torn parts of the eastern United States and grappling with different groups of people's approaches to dealing with this conflict practically and psychologically, while not spoon-feeding you the politics of the landscape that they're going through.
Yeah.
And I think some people didn't like the lack of spoon-feeding, which I will never understand. I hate being spoon-fed things like that, especially like political exposition. And you made the excellent point as soon as we left the theater.
Sorry.
No, it was great. No, I'm glad you said it. It was totally correct. And you immediately assessed that, like, if we had been spoon-fed, like, these are the good guys and these are the bad guys and here's what they did to get in the situation, it would have become so stale so fast and aged horribly.
Yeah.
And this would have been like useless weeks from now as a piece of art.
Yeah. Yeah. And the more I think about it and the intention, I think I have a great appreciation for Alex Garland's intention to leave politics generally out of it. There's some reference to certain political things that have happened, but not directly involved with this particular conflict. And I really appreciated that for the timelessness, like we were just talking about. But I also think that it perfectly replicates this kind of outside looking in at a conflict that you're not understanding. So when you're watching the news and a new conflict is unfolding and you're not understanding the particular politics underlying it, you can quickly become overwhelmed with the brutality because you are not entrenched in the conflict itself and the morality of the conflict. And when I was watching this movie, I was thinking, war is so fucking stupid. I hate war and I hate violence and I hate seeing people be terrible to one another. And that's exactly what I feel when I look at other political conflicts happening right now. And the despair that I feel when I'm watching the news or reading the news. And I really appreciated that. I felt seen and I felt like it helped me understand things about the way I've been processing our own news cycle. And this was being made prior to certain conflicts that are ongoing right now, like Gaza and Israel. This was being produced well before October 7th, which it has been pointed out by a couple of reviews that I've read. And I just felt like it replicated that for me in a way that I found very unsettling and very worthwhile, that I think a lot of people didn't enjoy. Yeah, if that makes sense. I hope that makes some semblance of sense, but
it definitely makes sense. I mean, our entry point into the story is through people who are meant to be objective by definition. And I think that is one of the only ways from a storytelling point of view where you could achieve that in this type of story is by picking the people that are meant to be the most objective ones, which are photojournalists or journalists in the case of our core four. And I think that's exactly what the news is meant to do, is convey an objective sense of a conflict. But I think this movie argues that, yes, that is what journalism should be, but it's not always successful. But that doesn't mean the pursuit of that is not worth it.
Yeah.
And I was definitely listening to a great interview that I really enjoyed, which Sean Fennessy did on The Big Picture. He interviewed Alex Garland, and they talked a lot about the role of the media in the current political climate in the U.S. and the sort of push and pull relationship that Alex Garland has had with the media all of his life, because he grew up around a lot of journalists, and so he's been thinking about their role and their tendencies for a long time.
Yeah. On a similar note, I recently, or a couple of hours ago, read Jonathan Lack, who we've had on the podcast in the past. He writes incredible film reviews, and I think his wording is very poetic and beautiful. And he wrote a review calling this Alex Garland's masterpiece, and I really wanted to read it because it's one of the most positive reviews of this film that I've seen, and I really wanted to get his take on it. And I just want to read a little snippet from it because I found it very moving, and I think that he's worded it much better than I could ever attempt to. But he's talking about photojournalists and their purpose. And he says, they do so because at any moment, They might snatch from chaos the single image that shakes somebody, somewhere, out of apathy. The one that stops enough of the public in their tracks to change the course of the conflict, or, failing that, the one that contextualizes and immortalizes the moment for history. And I just really think that that captures a lot of what Kirsten Dunst's character is saying, where she's saying, every time I don't remember the line exactly. It's in the trailer.
Like, every time I photographed a war zone, I thought I was sending a warning home.
Yes.
Don't do this.
Yeah.
Which I think is the thesis statement of the film,
yeah.
in my opinion. And I definitely recognized it from the trailer. I mean, I think that's the clearest thesis statement of the film, in my mind.
Yeah. And I think it speaks to that idea that this might not always be successful in doing that, but that's why they're doing this, and that's why these people are the heroes of this film. And yeah, I'm really glad that Alex Garland portrayed that. I also wanted to bring up that it reminded me a lot of my response to 28 Days in Mariupol, where you're following a group of journalists documenting the atrocities happening in Ukraine. And I think that it really put things into perspective for me. And I just wish that we could get more people to watch things like that, because I think it would change our response to certain conflicts. And it really highlighted the importance of what those journalists were doing for me. But yeah, I can't say enough good stuff about how this movie portrayed the photojournalism aspect.
Yeah, and I think when people say it doesn't have any ideas because it lacks political details, or I'm not sure exactly what those people think it lacks exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Perhaps I could understand if people felt like it's not enough for this movie to be a warning. It also has to be a playbook of how to avoid this. And if we don't know how this war started, how can we avoid it?
Mm-hmm.
I totally understand that sentiment, but I think that shows a lack of appreciation for two crucial steps that this movie does give you
mm-hmm.
in avoiding this sort of conflict in the U.S., because I think it's clearly conveying step number one is don't be so arrogant as to think this couldn't actually happen
mm-hmm.
here.
Yes.
Step number two, when you talk about the U.S. like needing a civil war or heading toward a civil war, think about what you're actually saying and think about what that would really mean.
Mm-hmm.
This movie gives you a visual and an auditory language to think about that concretely,
mm-hmm.
and maybe not be so glib or so flip about talking about that sort of conflict happening here.
Yeah.
Because if you actually take it seriously as a thing, a reality that could happen, I mean, it happened once. It could certainly happen again. And then this gives you a cinematic language to be like, actually, maybe I should treat this as a horror movie that we should be avoiding at all costs. And I think that maps onto something Alex Garland said in that interview with Sean Fennessy, which basically amounted to his views on extremism in the current political climate and how dangerous it is, and how he thinks extremism, period, is just a major issue that should be taken extremely seriously, because political extremism leads to real world horrors. And so I think he's just trying to convey that gravity, whether you think being extreme on any side of the spectrum is appropriate. Think about what type of dehumanizing events that could result in down the road. And that's what you're seeing play out time and time again in the film. And no, you don't know the political leanings of the people you're watching carry out atrocities, but the point is that we're trying to avoid getting to that point in the United States. And if any of those people, regardless of where they started on a political spectrum, had thought about constructive conflict resolution before getting to that point, maybe it could have been avoided. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, but I think the movie does a really good job of countering people that don't think this type of civil unrest could happen here, either because they can't imagine it or because they think the U.S. has somehow magically progressed to a post-conflict stage of democracy. And I think it can serve as a reminder that at any point you could have a complete unraveling and loss of control of the social and political structures, no matter how far you think you've progressed as a country or as a democracy. And you and I have lived through events. Well, yes. I should just speak for myself, but
no, I'm thinking of
the same thing we watched on the news unfold together at the same lab bench. And we were like, how is this happening?
Yeah.
In the country that we've grown up in? This seems like it shouldn't happen in a place that we assumed had order, but obviously people in the U.S. are shocked every day about where things are at this state. And so to me, it brought up a lot of the same feeling as like, this is exactly, I've had these feelings watching the news, being like, wow, I didn't think this could happen here, but maybe I should actually think again, because we're not so special that we can't have horrible things happening in the United States that are completely out of a single person's control.
Yeah.
And I think that has value. If people think that's not nuanced or complex enough, then I'm not sure what they're looking for, but I think just serving as that reminder or serving as that concrete example is certainly value enough.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I agree with what you're saying. I also think that there were moments through the film where I was having trouble figuring out like which side was which, or like who we were seeing and which soldiers we were seeing. And if you're like paying attention to certain details, there are details that make it a little more obvious, but it is a little convoluted. And I think it's intentionally convoluted and a little confusing because when you remove the politics, that us versus them mentality is taken away from you and you are forced to be viewing it more objectively. You don't get to make a decision on who's evil in this world. And I think that might be part of why people don't feel like it has that message, because we're so used to like an us versus them and enemy, and we don't have that. We don't have a clear enemy. And I think that might be why people are confusing it for not having a clear story or a clear message, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
From a storytelling perspective, we're trained to expect that. And the movie intentionally takes that from you. And I think if you go in without a preconceived notion, you can take a lot away from it. But I think that an open mind is necessary to appreciate this film. That's what I'll say.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely information given to you that you can discern who is who in many instances. Like, for instance, in the text of the film, they describe, I guess, maybe this is getting into spoilers. Let's give a spoiler warning here.
Yeah. Goodbye if you haven't seen the film.
Just come back when you've seen it.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us this week on Frenn Diagram. Thank you to Tyler Seek for the creation of our intro and outro music. Did you take any of our recommendations? Have any thoughts on the show? Let us know at frienddiagrampod@gmail.com, and we might read your email on a future episode. If you can, please take a moment to rate and review the show on your podcast app of choice, and we'll see you back here, same place next week. Bye for now.